Here I am, putting fresh paint onto my messy palette. Using fresh paint will give you rich, well-saturated washes of color, instead of the light, wimpy ones. I'm using cobalt blue on one side and burnt sienna on the other. I like to jazz up my burnt sienna by adding a little quinacridone sienna to it. I do this by putting the colors in the same well and mixing them together with a palette knife. If you have combinations you use a lot, you may want to keep them already mixed. Most artists have favorite colors, and those personal mixes can help make your paintings unique. First, I'm getting my pure colors ready. On one side, I'm using my large soft hockey brush to mix a big puddle of pure cobalt blue. When that's done, I squeeze out the excess so I don't waste the paint. That's messy but economical. Then I wash out my brush and mix another big puddle of the pure burnt sienna mix. By mixing my colors ahead of time, I don't end up with a distracting streak of pure paint on my paper. Now I'm ready to paint. This is 140-pound cold-pressed Kilimanjaro paper from Cheap Joe's. I didn't tape it down because I'm working very wet, and I wanted the paper to be able to stretch without buckling. I start my painting on dry paper. If you're more comfortable working on wet paper, that will also work well, as long as you use about twice as much paint pigment to make up for the added water already in the wet paper. I dance my brush across the paper, and then, without cleaning or adding any more water, I dip my brush into the cobalt blue. The two colors mix in the brush and on the paper. This doesn't give me very much pure cobalt blue showing, because I'm going to save that for the sky at the top of the picture. Don't paint too carefully or overbrush your work. Just lay the paint down somewhere close to where you want it and leave it alone. Now I did clean my brush to get some pure blue for the sky. Notice there is no staying within the lines because there are no lines. I think that helps you to be more intuitive in this painting. Now I'm using a spray bottle, commonly called a mister because it produces a fine spray of tiny water droplets. I missed some of the spots of dry paper that didn't get hit with the paintbrush. This leaves water puddled on my paper, and I'm going to use that to do a little more mixing. I carefully pick up one edge of the paper and turn it back and forth one time. Much of the color has already settled down into the paper, but the loose color will continue mixing on its own until it's dry. This is a generic plastic wrap that I use in my kitchen. I tear off about 8 inches and wad it up, then unwad it a bit and press it down onto my wet paper. I want to cover all of the rock area, so it takes several pieces of plastic wrap. Notice that I don't move it once I put it down. I just let it form whatever shape it wants and press it gently so that it sticks to the wet paper. I only put the plastic wrap where the rocks will be, leaving the sky area uncovered. Since I don't have lines for the top of the rocks, the sky area begins wherever the rocks end. I let this dry for about 30 minutes. When I pull the plastic wrap away, you can see the interesting pattern that's left. There's still 3 areas of fairly pure burnt sienna and lots of wonderful blue-gray mixtures. It's still damp, so I dry it completely. I'm going to put a seagull on top of these rocks. I printed it out facing either direction. I decide I like it better in the left corner. I use a piece of graphite paper to transfer the image of the seagull to my watercolor paper. I could have drawn the seagull ahead of time and masked him out, but that leaves hard edges and startlingly bright white paper. His color will match the rest of the painting much better this way. Back to painting. Using the same colors from before, but a smaller round brush with a good point, I follow the outline made by some of the plastic wrap to suggest a rock ledge, just using my imagination. I do this by painting a dark shadow behind the outline, then adding water to the top side so you have a dark edge that defines the rocks below and fades out above. As the pattern created by the plastic wrap is very random, my rocks have an odd feeling of reality, with lots of nooks and crannies. To paint the seagull, I again used the same colors, dipping my brush in first the blue mix and then the brown mix, without adding water or washing out the brush, just working quickly and letting the color mix as it will. I'm just suggesting some detail in the feathers as this is a quick demo, but you can spend as much time on the bird as you want. I dry the seagull. So far, this painting is mostly medium values, which is boring. So I decide to make the sky darker. As I'll be working on a bigger area, I grab a bigger brush, a 3/4 inch oval brush with a good point. I work carefully around the seagull and leave the cloud area unpainted. Then dump some clean water onto it while the dark sky wash is still damp. While this is drying, I decide I want the bird's eye darker than the sky, since the bird is the center of interest. I darken up his eye with a small brush and a touch of dark green to make him even more eye-catching. After the cloud dries, I don't like the hard line at the top, so I grab my toothbrush to soften it. To do this, the toothbrush needs to be damp, and you should rub gently in a circular motion. This reactivates the dry paint, and you can lift it off by blotting it with a paper towel. Sometimes I use a toothbrush to reactivate the cloud paint and swirl it down to the bottom of the cloud to suggest shadows. With the bird at the top, I feel we need a counterpoint or two at the bottom for balance. So I use more blue and brown to darken up a couple of the shadow areas at the bottom.